And welcome to the Social Justice Forums. I am your host, Daren Jaime. Today, we're taking a reflective journey through the social justice landscape of the year 2023, a show that provides a deeper understanding of the issues and inequities that so many individuals face. We also present multiple points of view and promote civic engagement. So stay tuned because the 2023 Year in Review of the Social Justice Forum starts now. Welcome back. Rising Ground embraces the responsibility of providing children, adults, and families with the tools to rise above adversity and positively steer their lives. It's adapted to evolving community needs and stands out as a champion of result-driven, evidence-based practices. We sat down with Rising Ground CEO, Alan Mucatel, and then the Senior Vice President of Diversity, Fairness, and Belonging, Travis Rogers. They shared more. Talk to me, Alan, a little bit about what Rising Ground is all about. I gave a little intro, but you can take us a little deeper.
Sure. I think we're a little bit of an unknown force here in New York City. We're a large multi-service, human service organization with over 100 different programs in 80 plus different locations across the borough, all the boroughs of the city. And what we're doing is helping people to move upward and forward in their lives by providing them with a solid foundation from which to grow. And we do that in a number of different ways in a number of different programs, whether it's on the child welfare side, foster care prevention, supporting survivors of intimate partner violence, helping young people who have come to this country unaccompanied as they settle into the United States. So a wide range of services directed to lots of New Yorkers.
Travis, a little bit about the work you do.
Oh, thank you for that question.
Yeah.
So I run our Diversity, Fairness, and Belonging department here at Rising Ground, and it pours into our staff, into the people that we serve, in that we represent a large swath of people across all races, genders, gender identities, socioeconomic statuses. But the more important thing is that our staff actually reflects the people that we work with and that we serve. So there's a better understanding of how we can provide them with better services.
Yeah. When we talk about the community, obviously a lot of different needs, right? So let's unpack a little bit. Let's talk about youth and youth development. I know that's work that you do as well. Talk about how we're impacting youth here.
So let me give you one example where we have a very large presence working with young people, and that is supporting individuals who are identified as runaway and homeless youth. And at Rising Ground, we run a number of transitional independent living programs scattered across New York, including several here in the Bronx. And those provide longer-term residence for individuals as they begin to plan their future towards adulthood and settling in obtaining employment and obtaining housing. We also run in Queens, the drop-in center, so that's working directly with young people who are on the streets. In Brooklyn, we run a mental health hub, again, for young people who are on the streets. So we have a very large presence in supporting a truly vulnerable sector of young people here in the city. We do a lot of other work with young people as well, but that's one area.
Yeah, well, you take a look at those particular areas. Are you seeing any numbers that are continuing to rise in population?
Yes. So one of the issues that we face here in New York is we know we have a large homeless population in general, right? And that's being influenced as well as individuals who are coming here as asylum seekers too. So there's a lot of stressors, of course, on the system. Our focus is on young people, and there's a continuous need to support them because those, unfortunately, the dynamics that play out for a number of young people remain the same. There are challenges around acceptance with their family members. There are challenges around not getting the supports they feel they needed in their home life, and that continues, sadly, to bring young people to the streets.
Let me walk into your ballpark for a minute. So if I'm coming in as a young person, right, and I'm dealing with the issues of life, I come to this organization and I see somebody who looks like me. How much does that make a difference?
It makes a huge difference. We know that young people connect better with people that look like them, particularly if you talk about black males. They connect better with older black men who can guide them along their way, really reinforce some of the educational needs that they have, or really get them off of the streets and provide them with services, or that language connection. Having someone that speaks the same language as you, from the same dialect, goes a long way in really crossing some of those barriers that might prevent some struggles there. And then as an organization, we pour into doing anti-bias and anti-racism training. So even though I look just like you, our shared experiences might not always be the same, or I might be packing some other things inside of me that I've taken on from the system. So we as an organization do all the training to help you get out of that piece so that you can better serve the people that we work with.
Yeah. It's almost like when we talk about Rising Ground, it's really digging way deep beneath the surface, right? Because there's a lot of surface things that people are dealing with, but at the same time, there's really some real highly, deeply entrenched things that our community is dealing with from, you talk about youth, talk about education, things like that. On the educational front, what are you seeing?
Well, I think what you're touching on here is just the notion of trauma that is really a part of
Prevalent.
so many
Right.
experiences, whether or not you're talking about racial-related trauma, sure, poverty, mental health concerns, poor housing situations, lack of access to other services. So there's a whole array of challenges that whether we're talking about young people or families or single adults are experiencing, and of course, an overlay of poverty that elevates the concerns that we have. And so we are seeing people who are coming to us with very significant needs, and what we try to do is help them. First, we meet them where they're at. We look to support them in concrete ways, and then also provide them with the skills that allow them, in whatever programs we're talking about, allow them to move forward in their lives.
Yeah, sensitivity. I mean, trauma is a big a teacher for a lot. Let me hear from you, both of you. How have you been impacted as an organization since COVID? I mean, COVID has had detrimental effects on a lot of organizations. What's it been like for you?
I'll take that one. Travis fortunately wasn't with us for the COVID period, so he got to miss that experience.
I give a different perspective.
But he has a different perspective for sure. Well, first, we know that there is, especially for young people, but also for adults, there is a huge mental health residual component that we are experiencing across society, right? We know people are carrying with them tremendous built-up anxieties, phobias, just really, we are starting to see, we see it on the streets. Listen, I'm a native New Yorker, and we are seeing things today that we weren't seeing as much, perhaps. Maybe they were always there, maybe they just became more clear to us, but I also think that they've been elevated as a result of COVID. We also are seeing a different work environment that we had before, right? There's lots of tensions about where people want to work, how they want to work, and that is impacting the human service, social service sector as well, and we're no different in that regard. So we're trying to accommodate individual needs, not individual needs, but accommodate collective needs of employees. We want to be a competitive place to work, and yet a lot of our work, the very nature of human services, is to be directly present with somebody.
Right.
So being remote doesn't work always so well in that case. So that's a huge challenge for our world.
Absolutely.
And I would say, in my time here at Rising Ground, just this week, we had staff going through undoing racism training. And we also have a racial trauma group that's going through training as well. And they've highlighted some of the things that Alan pointed out as far as the mental health issues that our youth are facing and some of the systemic oppression that occurred that kind of bubbled up and boiled over as a result of COVID. And so they were in their meeting today just really unpacking the systems and where we fit in the systems and how we can intervene for our students, while also still working through the things that they had to work through during COVID. So we have to remember that our staff has their own challenges as a result of COVID, while also trying to accommodate them and be competitive in the workforce.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's amazing because the dynamic has shifted. Let's just be honest. The dynamic has shifted. It's a hard job to provide services. Hard job sometimes to meet the needs of that have changed, that have forced all of us to have to really, change. Where do you think for yourself in the organization that you're making the most impact?
I would say that we make our most impact in the direct spot, right? That our work is, of course, when you sit in the position of a CEO, you're thinking about the collective impact of your organization. And the truth is the impact of this organization is vast and impressive. We're supporting close to 25,000 individuals at any given moment. So a really large impact. But what does that really mean? It's the aggregation of individual engagement, individual advancement, individual achievements. And I think we make tremendous impact in those one-on-one moments. And they can be somebody learning to address a challenge they had in their life, somebody improving a relationship that has gone wrong, somebody acquiring some skill that's going to allow them to be more gainfully employed. There's any number of things that happen along the way, but that's, I think, where we are I think it's the thing that we're most proud of. And I would say one of the things we do when we start meetings at our organization, we always ask this following question: can somebody share a success, just one success? Why? Because it always roots us, it grounds us back in why the reason we're doing this work is to help the individuals that we're supposed to support.
Yeah, success makes a whole lot of difference. I mean, I think it enhances the work that you do, but at the same time, it also is a point that you've made the difference in the life of somebody. And when we talk about, the changing economy, we talk about, changing workforce, what has been the hardest thing for you to adapt to in all of this?
Well, I think part of the challenge for us today is, like many employers, is to find people who are drawn to our work. I want to say this: for somebody who really wants to have a direct impact working with, whether it's young people, with adults, or with families, if that's work that is of interest to you, then a place like Rise and Ground can actually deliver that experience to you in the way that you want it to happen. So I think one of the challenges for us is to connect with individuals who want to do that work. We can then support them and provide them with the right environment, the training, the encouragement, the camaraderie that allow them to grow and thrive in a career that can help other people.
The conversation, when we talk about diversity and equity and fairness, right? This is a conversation that we know has been ongoing for years, right? Sometimes I sit in the seat and say, how hard is it for somebody to just, get on board? You understand what it is. But from your lens,
Right.
what's it like having the conversation, and what's it like as you look through the lens of other people who are saying, maybe some for the first time, like, I didn't get it?
That's a great question. So you have to take a multi-pronged approach, right? It's a little bit of whack-a-mole. You have to have the patience to really sit down and explain to people what the issues are. I like to make numbers personal for people, so I create the big picture and then boil it down to a personal story, either my own or someone else that I know, so that people can truly get it. You have to have investment from your organization. Lots of times in the DEI space, after George Floyd, a lot of DEI executives were hired, but the funding there for the positions didn't exist, right? And so it makes the job even harder, kind of to squeeze blood from a rock, right? So I always tell folks that want to get involved in my profession, when you start talking to employers, actually talk to them about what the budget might be for your department. And what the expectations are. Can we set tangible outcomes? And what the overall goal and mission of the organization actually is, right? And for an organization like Rise and Ground, it's made it a lot easier because I have support from leadership. I have a staff that really truly cares about the work and wants to get better at providing the services. And also, a lot of our staff is willing to recognize that they have a personal experience that kind of shaped their lens, but they also have an experience that's affected by systems. And how can they split those two things apart to really analyze what's going on, and how can they navigate that to provide the best services possible for our folks.
The advantage of having this particular part of your administration, having diversity, equity, fairness, what has it been like for you?
So Travis has been a long time in coming. He doesn't know that, obviously, because he wasn't there for that part. There was a lot of work that our organization has been doing for a number of years in the diversity, fairness, and belonging space, all driven initially, before he's arrived, by volunteers, right? All of us deciding that this is really an important thing for an organization like us. 93% of the people who work for us are people of color. The vast majority of the people who we support are people of color. We represent a lot of people in the LGBTQ community. We have a whole array of what diversity means. And so, but now having him is to have a thought partner, to have a thought leader, to have somebody who brings a professional experience to the efforts that we've been putting forward is wonderful. It's really joyful to me personally, right, to get to interact with him, to have conversations, to poke challenges where they should be had, is really wonderful. And I think that while I don't know that Rise will be able to change, some of these issues. No, sorry. All of these issues are so big, right? They are a true. Racism is a cancer that is embedded in our makeup, sadly, and it's not going to be fixed tomorrow.
Right.
But what I think we can do is we can take this one organization, invest really heavily about trying to change approaches, minds, actions, and we can make a difference here. And we can also be, I guess, a a great example beyond our immediate impact.
I want to ask a question. We talked about runaway youth earlier. Certainly we can't divulge everything, but is there a particular thing that we're hearing from our youth when we talk about runaway youth and services? Or is somebody says, why are kids running away from home? You know, or is there anything that we can learn, we can glean?
You know, of course, every individual's situation is
Different.
for them and particular for them. But generally, it's about communication and understanding, right? A willingness to listen to young people, to acknowledge the strengths and capacities they have, and the voice that they're expressing. Mm-hmm. And I think when that doesn't happen well, it leads to frictions, and those frictions then sometimes can take a life of their own.
Right. Yeah. I want to kind of let you out because when we talk about this, right, you talk about that at that level with young people, CI mushrooms, and now we've got a lot of societal issues that are just based on lack of communication or being heard or being that. But, you know, congratulations for the work that you do. If somebody's out there watching and saying, listen, how do I get connected? What do they do?
Very easy. www.risingground.org. You can find information about the services that we provide. You can find information about employment opportunities. You can learn about becoming a foster parent. We welcome you and your support and engagement in our work in every possible way.
Yeah. And what kind of conversations are you having nowadays with the employees?
It's a great question, because today we talked about racism and systemic racism, and actually boiled it down to actual examples from lived experiences involving schools, right? And so how the school system's operating as a form of oppression for kids of color. That was a conversation today. A conversation tomorrow that we're having about in a DEI world is about inclusivity and how do we create an atmosphere at work where we're inclusive to our non-binary colleagues, right? And so there's just multiple conversations that need to be had about inclusion, acceptance, affirming people, and really pressing forward in this work.
Yeah, I hear a lot. You know, one of the things that is a pet peeve of mine. I always get irked by people saying, "We gotta have conversations, and then there's never a space for it, right? Or we say, "Oh, we need to talk," and we never get around to talking, right? But then at the end of the day,
we have a lot of those conversations at Rising Ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have an anti-racism working group that Alan sits on, that many people of our leadership sit on, and they talk about policies and practices as it pertains to race and equity in the organization.
I would just say it's important to have a space for conversation, and then it's also important to take conversation and try to make it into action.
Yeah, that's what
and that's the biggest thing, right? I mean, we can have a conversation until we're blue in the face, but if there's no action behind the conversation.
And not all action has to be huge, right? You can sometimes it's best to just start, what is the low-hanging fruit? Let's make some little progress. Let that progress become an example about what's possible. Let's learn from that and do the next thing. And so one of the things that is wonderful about having Travis join us is he's got the same approach that many of our leaders do, which is this has got to become real.
Right.
Yeah.
We got to walk the walk.
Yeah, I teach this in leadership circles that I'm in. I say you celebrate small victories, you have small victories.
All the small ones.
And then guess what? You have large ones, and then you get to a place where you can do some great big things. But you guys are doing the great and the small. Thank you so much for being with us, Al and Travis.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you. All right. We have to take a quick break. We'll be back more with the Social Justice Forum in a few. And welcome back. Tender Steps of New York Incorporated is a not-for-profit that's dedicated to helping families in challenging circumstances. Through courses, workshops, advocacy, and case management, they strive to rebuild family values and provide nurturing home for at-risk children. Recently, we had the chance to speak with Tender Steps of New York NYC's president and founder, Evelyn Batista Miller, and board member, Dr. Audrey Baker, to discuss more.
Now, can you introduce us a little bit more and tell us about Tender Steps of New York and its overall mission?
Thank you for having us once again. I feel like home. I graduated from Wharton High School, here, behind here, from the Bronx, and pretty much I I had relocated to Rockland County, and in the work that we have done, I saw a need. And the need was very dear to my heart as a first generation Dominican, parents with language barriers and just acquiring resources. And we created this nonprofit, and we're going to be celebrating 10 years
Oh
of,
wow, congrats.
of supporting families and children, as well as school officials.
Well, I want to expand on that a little bit more. You talked about like your upbringing and kind of being in this area. Can you talk a little bit more about like why that's so important that like people from the community are, using their platform to help others within the community?
Absolutely. I feel that we are put here for a purpose. And I came from the New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA projects, pretty much being raised during the crack times when you're going down the stairs in the project and you see the crack valves and all that. But despite that different adversity, we had a wonderful nuclear family. Both my parents were just incredible in utilizing resources and inspiring us and empowering us, as well as utilizing our gifts to be a blessing to others.
Now, I also want to mention the fact that, I said that it's really focuses on rebuilding family and providing like just opportunity for children in the area. How do you and your team approach this mission? As I can imagine that it is probably quite challenging to even help like kids within your own family. So, how do you approach that when you're helping a bunch of children and young adults within the community?
I'm going to ask Dr. Baker to
course.
answer. She's been one of the long-standing board members for Tender Steps. So, Dr. Baker, maybe
Thank you
can-
so very much.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have worked with Evelyn for almost 10 years. I'm one of the oldest members in the organization, and I call myself the grandmother. And we
I said long-standing.
That-
I didn't even talk about the age part.
and we are impassioned about what we do here. We have had wonderful backgrounds. We've had wonderful parents who brought us to the point of understanding and having a goal value system to uplift the community and uplift humanity. And I'm an educator. You don't ever retire as an educator. You remain an educator. But we
Retired New York City
That's right.
principal.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
That's
thank you.
amazing.
And so we are accustomed to dealing with families. We are compassionate. We are involved with providing families with hope and with the success and providing efforts to make them successful in their lives. So no matter if they are dealing with crisis at this particular point, they are maybe out of their home or they're going through an economic crisis, we have been, and Evelyn has been so forthright and so diligent in trying to provide the kinds of resources and hope that we have had ourselves to extend it to the members of our community, whether you're in New York City, because I'm from Brooklyn, or from Rockland County.
Now, what are some of the key services you offer to achieve these goals?
Especially with what we're dealing now with undocumented children, families, language barrier has been one of the main support systems we've been doing in terms of offering interpreting services, offering support for families who are not able to learn how to navigate the system due to the language barriers. So in what we also have done is, as I mentioned, parenting workshops within shelters. We've done parenting workshop within school systems, just helping families, especially with the name of Tender Steps in New York. I came up with that because I know that as a person of color, it's really hard to ask for help. And using the word tender, I thought that was more welcoming and not to have families that are shameful of getting help. Yeah. And in terms of the other programs that we do a lot of collaboration because there's so many organizations that are doing great work. A lot of times the lack of collaboration really makes it less that you're making an impact. So Tender Steps have been very instrumental in building that bridge especially with the 2 chapters in the NAACP in Rockland County, as well as legislators. We've done interpreting for them when they're trying to communicate with the community for different capacities. We've also done renovation at a shelter. I mean, it's something that we didn't do it alone. We collaborated with another nonprofit, and that's something that's important to share because we can't do it alone.
I also, you mentioned something that I thought was so important, and you said that like sometimes families may feel shame. I also want to add that to see that, the people who are behind the organization look like the families, I can imagine is also so important, because especially when we're dealing with families, sometimes there's a lot of distrust. When someone says they're going to help you, maybe people are afraid, does this mean they're going to take my children away? Does this mean that they don't think I'm a fit parent? How do you deal with that, or how do you use the power that you have in the community to let the people know, like, I came from where you came from, and like I understand what you're going through, and not that it's like a stranger saying that they're going to help your family?
I think knowing another language, especially Spanish, has been very instrumental as an Afro-Latina that I am. That also takes some family back because they see the way I look, and then when to hear me speak another language, it is empowering to them to know that, oh, I'm not alone, or I don't need to grab my niece to be my interpreter, because that was me. I used to go to welfare appointments with my mom to do the interpreting for her. My siblings, we used to take turns to do that, and I remember how they treated my mother. And I know that language barrier, sometimes people mistake not knowing the English language as not being intelligent.
Right.
And that's really unfortunate, because a lot of these adults leave their country being a doctor, a surgeon, attorney, and guess what? When they come to the United States, you have to start from square one, right? And the most important thing is learning the language. So that's something that we really support in helping them understand that despite that, we're here for you and we're gonna actually help you. We did a series of Spanish-only workshops in Washington Heights, and what was interesting about it is that the parents did not know English at all. So this was Spanish only. And what touched me was when I was doing the workshop with them, as well as the board member who supported me there, I asked them one question, and it was one of the most emotional questions. I said to them, what was the dream that you gave up to come here and to be there for your family? And no one ever asked them that. Like, it was very emotional, and it was a great process towards the ending of it.
And I think you can definitely add to that, yeah.
Well, one of the things that we've been doing in our organization is to do the mentoring. It's a very, very important piece, and it's significant to us because we're not just doing it to the parents. We're also doing it with the students, and we're doing it collaboratively. We're not doing it in a cellular form. So that we go to the colleges and do presentations, youth as well as parent presentations. We also go into the schools, and having been educators, we know how to facilitate and navigate that road so that we can provide community service credits for the students. So we have had projects where we recruited students to come out, and then they get credits on the high school program for having been assisting us in our little projects.
Well, I wanted to expand on that. You both have such an extensive background working with families and children, and then also being an educator. What have you used from your past experience to help with the work that you're doing now?
Well, I'm a mother. I'm here with my amazing husband, who's definitely a great partner. We have 4 kids together. So we were like, okay, we're not going to have a 5th. I was like, so I want to have another baby. So this was it. And what's interesting about it is I have 4 amazing children, and each of them are different, right? So there's different challenges, different, and knowing what I go through, and I'm a professional. I went to the most prestigious, college for social welfare, SUNY Albany. I got that administrative, all of these things. But guess what? When you become a parent, all that goes out the window because we lose our cool and we have to try to compose ourselves. So if I'm struggling with that and I'm like debating, I cannot imagine someone who let's say doesn't have those types of experiences. So I want to use my gifts, and my mom raised 5 of us, so I learned a little bit from her as well. And especially with the fact that I know that I was only 22 when I lost my dad. He unfortunately passed away on the flight 587, which was the flight that crashed like 2 months after September 11th. This was the flight going to the Dominican Republic. Now, I was 22 when that happened, and I'm so grateful that I had a great foundation with both my parents, that it wasn't the end for me in the sense of being motivated, because my mother was an incredible woman. But that prompted me to say, you know what? I'm here for a reason. That was horrible what occurred, but yet I know I have more to give. And that's what brings me to this space.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm curious to know, what have you used from your background as an educator to help you with the work that you're doing for the community now?
Well, I started off as a teacher in a special education environment, and then I sailed through the process and became an assistant principal and working in different hospital sites and different agencies. I opened up different schools. I was one of the few to have an agency school actually come out to a regular school building. Then I became the director of pupil personnel in the Bronx for 24,000 children, became the principal. I have run for a position for the New York State Board of Regents. And I have a mother, my twin sister and I had a mother who lived to be 106 years old. So while everyone was doing Black Lives Matter, we were also doing Nursing Home Lives Matter. We are advocates and activists for younger children as well as older people. And so we are pursuing all of the gifts that we have had. We don't have lack of anything. We have been so totally blessed to have had a mother to live to 106 years old and to provide the kind of educational and professional and personal support that we've had. And so this is what we do. We're here on earth to serve and not to be served.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's pretty amazing, 106. I'm like,
Yes.
in awe by hearing that. So that's amazing. Now, I want to know, what was the driving force behind creating the nonprofit? And I can imagine it's like a lot of people have ideas and they want to do amazing things for the community, but it takes a lot of work. So can you just talk about that experience and, what kind of kept you pushing to kind of see where it's at right now?
Yes, when I moved to Rockland County, this was in 2003, I started noticing that a lot of parents were not aware of their rights. Whether it's within the community, whether it's school, whether it's library, things like
Voting.
that. What? Voting. So I said, I need to educate them because they don't know, and they don't know that they have more rights than certain circumstances. So that made me say to myself, I want to do this under an umbrella, under an organization. I want to be helpful and purposeful and intentional as well. I know that during COVID, that put us all in a challenging position because you had to reinvent yourself. So when COVID happened, I felt like I needed another wind of something to help me keep going. And I feel so blessed to have been one of the 5 that was honored as Women of Distinction for 2020. And with that, I said, okay, so I could keep going. And of course, board members and I, we did webinars on where are we now. We created something called Redefining COVID, which is looking at the optimistic side of a terrible situation that we didn't know that was really coming.
The 5
With
E's.
the 5 E's, the parent thing. Pretty cool stuff. Just to share a little bit, unfortunately, we lost our mom to COVID. And despite that adversity, again, that propelled me even more, like, I could still do this. And especially with board members, incredible board members for Tender Steps, that has helped us continue to be focused despite things that happen within people's lives.
Yes.
And the people that we're servicing have probably gone through worse things.
Yes.
So we can do this.
Yes.
Now, I understand that you have like workshops and like just seeing you like excited. I want to know like what can people expect, when they attend these workshops and some of the other services that you provide?
Well, we don't do just academic and educational because we educate and inspire and involve all of our audiences, whether they're young or older, to be able to have hope and to take a look at where they are now so that they can catapult themselves to another platform, of success. And so we have a Santa breakfast, so not everything is academic and educational.
We do fun things.
We do fun things, and we also make sure that we are including parents as well as young people. And sometimes we see young people struggling by themselves. They have lost their parents, you know, and so they're trying to navigate the system on their own. And so Tender Steps has been a tender step to provide that kind of assistance to people who are going through crises and are unable to resolve them, and that if we're there, we can help them to navigate through the process.
And we've also helped individuals that are not parents themselves. Like a lot of the students that are coming undocumented, they're moving in with their godfather, their godmother, their aunt, uncle, or they were being raised by their grandparent, and they're meeting their parents for the first time. We've encountered a lot of that. So what we do is provide the access to assisting them.
That's amazing. And I think it's so important to talk about, because in a lot of communities of color, we don't have like the nuclear family all the time. You know, sometimes you are living with your cousin, or you live with your grandma, or your aunt is raising you. So I think that's so amazing that we have like organizations that recognize that and, you know, kind of view it as like it's something normal, like, you know, that's just a normal part of family. I also want to take, we have like a few minutes left, I want to take a little bit to talk about this book. Can you tell us about the book? And you talked about it earlier and how it meant a lot to you, so can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Can I just interject one thing? That when we have our visionary luncheons, it is not just for older people. We invite younger people, and we honor younger people also for the successes that they have had in their schools. So that is something that we do. It's not just honoring, you know, legislators or just people who have done wonderful things in the community. We're taking out an opportunity to look at students who are struggling but doing well, and to provide them with the kind of encouragement and motivation.
Thank you so much.
These books are a few clips of things we've done over the past 10 years. It shows when we were painting and renovating the shelter. It shows the cleanups that we've done within the community. It shows a lot of collaborations and workshops that we've done. So just to answer what you, it's just a bit of a few things that
Like some of the highlights.
Some of the highlights.
Okay, and then I wanted to know, like, do you have any specific success stories that, you know, that you hold close to your heart, that you think of, you know, while doing this work?
I'm thinking back 10 years ago when we started, there was a family, a gentleman, he got his son from whatever country it was and needed help. So he found me on Google and called the number, and what he needed help was something so simple as, where can I register my child? I haven't lived with this kid, with my son for years, but I want to get to know him. How can I do that? So it was just providing like the tools and, okay, so this is the resources, this is the community, and Tender Steps gets that a lot. Even we get questions for special education services and things like that. We've done workshop at Rockland Community College for special education one-on-one. Because again, it's that they are not aware of, and it's just informing them of those. So thinking about that family that by himself raising his child, he was just so grateful that he was able to find somebody that had some information for him, and he didn't speak English. So that was one of the challenges that he had in getting support.
Well, I think the work that you guys are doing is just purely amazing, and I'm so glad that I had an opportunity to talk to you about this. Could you quickly just let everybody know where they can go to learn more information?
They can find it on our website, www.tenderstepsofny.org.
All right, well, I want to thank you both so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we do have to take a quick break. We'll be back more with the Social Justice Forum in a few.
Congratulations, BronxNet, on 30 years. You started when I was born. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. This is Verona, the dancing reporter for Create Your World, and I thank BronxNet for being here to help me produce my show.
And welcome back. Throughout the year, our nation currently faces deep divisions, transcending from simple disagreements. Now, however, Color Us United proactively works to bridge these divides as well as promote unity. They stand by individuals disillusioned by portrayals of America as a divisive country. We recently sat down with the president of Color Us United, Kenny Sue, who shared his insight. Let's take a look. For somebody who may not be so familiar with the organization, obviously, give us a little bit about Color Us United and the community that you are serving.
That's a good point. We actually advocate for a race-blind America. So we don't care what color of the skin you are when you join Color Us United, as long as you believe that the ideals that unify America are not the ideals of tribe or race or skin color as your identity, but your identity as brothers and sisters, as friends, as neighbors, as family members. Those are all things that are so much more important in your career and in life than your race or your skin color. And if you are willing to unify behind those ideals in a divided time in our country and take on the policies that try to promote division on the basis of race, we will support you, we will help you, we will be your voice.
So talk to me about how you arrived to the conclusion of, no, we don't look at skin color. Why do you think that's beneficial?
It's through my personal experience. So my parents are immigrants from China. I was born here in America, and I experienced the great goodness of this country. Loving people of all races, including Caucasians, took me in, loved on me, schooled me, taught me, everything like that, taught me English, taught my family when they were poor and everything like that with no social connections. Got them to advance. And a lot of Asian Americans share this story. Their parents come here with no money and social connections, and within one generation, they're outcompeting whites. They're outcompeting all Americans in educational advancement, which is logged in my new book, An Inconvenient Minority. So that personal experience really shaped me and showed how it's really not about your race. It's about your culture. It's about what do you do with the opportunities that you've been given in society. And I want that message to be heard across the rest of the country.
But you'll have somebody who, like myself, will say, listen, that's great on personal experience, but if you live on, for instance, the black side of the spectrum, you would understand that you've been in this country for a long time, and much that's been talked about is the fact that access and not being granted that same kind of access or equality or equity. So how would you answer that?
I think the best kind of access is education. One of the reasons why Asian Americans are successful in the United States, despite having a lot of the disadvantages that a lot of minorities have, is that they rely on education to really move them forward. Asian Americans, for example, study twice as many hours as the average American. The average white person studies 8 hours, the average Asian studies 13, the average black person studies 5.5. How can we say that, we are a country divided on the basis of race when there are also vast disparities in cultural achievement as it comes to education? So I would say education is the biggest avenue towards getting out of those kinds of things, but it does require hard work. It does require those kinds of things. And I would advocate for those unifying values over a society that says, well, access is determined by skin color.
Hang out with me for a minute on this, Kenny, because I want to ask you the question. You can say education, but then on the other side, somebody say, listen, before I can even make it to the school, I got to make it out of my house. And when I deal with the issues of, income inequality, when I listen to the issues of housing discrimination, I can listen to all these other things before I even get to the area of education. Granted that education is very important, but there's so many other areas that we can tackle before we get to education. Follow what I'm saying?
I do, and I would like to bring up the example of New York City. In New York City, Asian Americans are actually the population that are most in poverty. Actually, they have the highest poverty rate out of all of the racial groups, higher than even Black Americans. Why? Well, because a lot of the Asian Americans are store owners, they're street sweepers, they are people who are way under the poverty rate. But if you look at these low-income Asian Americans' educational achievement, even despite facing all of these income disadvantages, they're actually higher in terms of math and reading test scores than even white Americans. Even upper middle class white Americans are outcompeted by low-income Asians in New York City. Don't take my word for it. Go buy my book, An Inconvenient Minority, to see for yourself. I've spoken with a lot of these poor Asian Americans. And by the way, poor people of all races, including Black Americans. And these people agree. How are they able to advance beyond their poverty? It is through the educational ideal, and they spend a lot of work. They spend all of their extra pennies that they work in the restaurants on their children and on helping them rise in education.
I think that's the story for a lot of different demographics. Let me go back to you. On the statistics, you said that Asian Americans lead in poverty. Can you clarify that again, once again?
They lead in poverty in New York City. That's what I meant.
And according to who?
According to the New York City poverty statistics.
New York City poverty statistic by, because I'm not, I've studied poverty for a minute. Didn't get that. I didn't get that statistic. I just wanted to just double check it. You know, we got a fact check on the show, so I got to make sure that what it is. That's why I said, where did you get that statistic from? Because there will be some that challenge.
Yeah, I think it comes from the employment and poverty statistics and the local government sources. But feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that's where I got it from.
So talk to me about social identities, because obviously there's social identities that exist out there, and how does putting the social identity aside actually help somebody?
How does what, sorry?
When you put social identity aside, how does it affect, what kind of effect does that create?
It means that I can approach you without assumptions based on the color of your skin. You and I, you see, we're having a polite, respectful conversation. That's how we should approach each other. You shouldn't make assumptions about me, my politics, my background, based on my skin color. And I shouldn't make assumptions about you. These days, there are a lot of Black Americans who are upper income. There are a lot of Asians who are lower income. And the way that you appear, the way that you dress, the way that you speak, those are all important in recognizing who you are as a person. And so I encourage people to practice color blindness, which is to intentionally, not assume things about a person's background based on their skin color.
Talk to me. You also took on Harvard University, and you had an issue with Harvard University. Let's bring it to the forefront. What was that about?
So Harvard University was practicing the opposite of what I've been preaching, which is they are making assumptions about you based on your skin color. If you identify as an Asian American, or even if you don't, if you just have an Asian last name, Harvard is going to rate you significantly lower on a thing called a personality test, which is determinant of your ability to get into Harvard. They would rate Asians lowest out of all of the races on this personality test, just to admit others with lower standards. Asians, of course, are scoring the highest academically. They're scoring the highest extracurricularly at Harvard. But the personality score is what dooms them, and it's unfair and it's discriminatory. I led the charge with Students for Fair Admissions to fight against that, and we recently won at the Supreme Court.
So when you talk about that win, how does that feel for you, given the fact that it was an uphill struggle?
It was a huge uphill struggle. People told me, even when I was early on, don't fight for rejected college Asians. They're not sexy. They're not somebody you should fight for. Nobody cares anyway. But it turns out a lot of Americans do care, because Americans fundamentally want people to be treated on the basis of merit. They don't want skin color for or against somebody. 75% of Americans believe race should not be used in college admissions. And in every state in which people try to use race in college admissions, it has been rejected, even in California, a very liberal state. So we care about minorities. We should care about helping minorities, but that should be done at the K-12 level. That should not be done in the college level.
Well, the problem is when you get to college, we have a history of universities, colleges who simply do not admit. And you can say, listen, they've been given an equal platform and have been given an equal platform for a long period of time. And in the process of being given an equal platform for a long period of time, have failed to just demonstrate equality and equity when it comes to, and I don't even want to say equity, because you have plenty of people where we have examples who are academically credible to enter into an institution, but do get bypassed just on this issue, do get bypassed on the issue of race. And this has been a long-standing issue for a while. How do you answer that?
Yeah, I would say, universities have long struggled with the issue about how to build a diverse and an inclusive space. I would say that the best way to build a diverse and inclusive space is to treat people based on their merit, right? If you start lowering standards, which Harvard had been doing for Black Americans, they were accepting Black Americans with SAT scores 270 plus points lower than Asian Americans. If you start lowering standards, you actually create a segregated culture because students will tend to study together in the same cohort of people who are academically in their range. And if you're not academically in their range, they're going to exclude you. So what's the best way to build an inclusive campus is to not lower standards, is to make sure that everybody admitted is qualified so that they can mingle with each other as academic equals.
Well, the thing about academic standards is, Kitty, that you got to think about it here. SATs are standardized scores, and everybody may not fare well in a standardized score. I wasn't great at taking standardized tests, but guess what? I graduated at the dean's list at the top of my class, but yet and still I didn't do well in the SAT. Matter of fact, didn't do too well whatsoever. I think there's a conversation that needs to be had for people who don't necessarily do well on standardized tests, and that being the sole barometer for academic merit.
Yeah, that's definitely a conversation we should have. I'm super glad that you graduated at the top of your dean's list. We want to make sure everybody has a good shot at graduating at the top 25% of their class. And I think that the end of affirmative action is going to help that.
Well, I think also, I don't know, because when you really look at it, the fact is you're not talking about underqualified people being about getting in. I think you have people who are actually qualified that are able to go to these institutions, people who can do the institution very well. Now, on the other hand, when you look at what's going on in these educational institutions, we understand that you're given the opportunity to make a choice. And the reality is there have been plenty of examples, where you have people of equal score, equal talent, but yet and still, when the number gets picked, it's not those in communities of color. Hence the need for affirmative action. It's not the saying that people are not credible enough to attend a college or a university. It's about the fairness, if you will, sometimes in the process that has long been. And I think that if we're really going to put it out here, in the end, by this law in some way, shape, or form, it also says we're going to rely on the university to do what's right, when in many cases, the university and the college hasn't done what's right historically.
Yeah,
that's why the need for the law exists.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. The university has not done right. They have lowered standards to admit less qualified Black Americans. They have raised standards to discriminate against high qualified Asian Americans. And, they have done it for legacies too. They have admitted lower qualified legacy students and children of donors because they want to get rich off of their legacy package. This is not right. This is not fair. I'm pushing for fairness. I want everybody to be admitted based on merit, and I get your frustration with standardized test scores, but they are still the best way to determine objectively toe-to-toe which applicant is competitive.
Now, we're going to disagree right there, brother. I can tell you that right now. We're going to disagree. I'm not going to sit here and say that standardized test scores are the best way to determine whether or not somebody's the best student or not. If you've got an A average going through the course of the year, you go and you take that SAT and you mess that SAT up, that should not be the sum total of your whole educational experience. That's one test, and that one test cannot be the basis.
You have an A average in courses that are not rigorous. It's not the same as having an A average in courses that are.
Say again, in courses that are not rigorous.
If you have an A average in courses that are not rigorous, it's not the same as having an A average in courses that are.
So when I get to Harvard or another institution, I'm going to take some of these courses, right? I mean, all these courses that I'm taking in college and universities are not going to be as rigorous either.
Look, I'm really glad that you graduated in your dean's list.
No, this ain't got to do with me. No. Take me out of the equation. Take me out of the equation.
Well, I'll tell you the hard facts. The Black Americans at Duke University who go to the math major have a 3 times likelier rate of dropping out of that STEM major and going to a less rigorous major because of affirmative action. That is a fact. Go to that Arcidiacono paper 2012, okay? I'm trying to help Black Americans succeed. And Black Americans do not succeed when they are put in classes in which they are admitted because of affirmative action.
I don't think you're trying to help Black Americans succeed because you can't speak for Black Americans, man. You can't do that. You can't say that. Now you might be trying to help yourself succeed, but you can't say that
the facts show.
you can't say that you're helping Black Americans succeed because guess what? That's not the path to success. You ask most Black Americans about the end of affirmative action and this recent law that's happened in the Supreme Court, they're going to tell you they're not in favor of that because it's not about the fact that it's not about the fact of merit as being said. You got credible people who have not been given a shot. And it has been long historic that Black people have not been given a fair shot. It's not about equality, it's about equality, it's about equity as well. And so when you talk something like that, you gotta be able to say the whole story. And the whole story is that there has been a history, long-standing history. So now the end of affirmative action is here, and we're hoping, what the hope is, that somebody's going to do right that hasn't done right already. And I think that's absolutely insane to think that in the end, we're going to hold the people who haven't done right to now do right who haven't done right. That doesn't make no sense. Make it make sense, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to help students, including students of color, is at the K-12 level. We need to make sure that our public school system has qualified teachers. We need to make sure that the standards are raised. We need to make sure that school discipline policies are successfully executed so that the students can learn and be in an environment where they can learn. That's what my new book, School of Woke, is all about, because it tells about how the K-12 system has gone in such disarray. So if I have a lot of thoughts on public education, I'm willing to talk about it, but that's my answer to that.
Yeah, we can continue this conversation all day. It's been good talking, man. I mean, I appreciate the conversation, and I think that there's some things that really need to be discussed. But when we look at what the educational system is right now, both in K-12 and also in higher education, we know what the challenges are. We know what the disparities are. So, I mean, to a certain extent, I understand what you're saying, and to a certain extent, I respectfully disagree. But I do want to give you the opportunity to let people know where they can check you out and catch your work.
Well, I appreciate it. So you can check me out at Kenny M. Xu, Kenny MXU, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and buy my new book, School of Woke and an Inconvenient Minority, where I talk about these issues with people who respectfully disagree. At Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and IndieBound, wherever books are sold.
And so, what's coming up next for you?
Lots of things, new initiatives with Colorists United, just making sure that high standards are achieved. My next issue that I'm really passionate about is an issue that you are passionate about as well, which is making sure that K-12 education gives the right standards to all children.
All right, Kenny, we're going to leave it there, man. It's been good having you here. Thanks for being with us here on the show.
Thank you.
We come to the end of our show today. We hope that you enjoyed this week's discussion on the Bronx Social Justice Forums. Now, to rewatch this week's edition, you can catch the Recablecast right here on BronxNet.org. If you want to join the conversation and present your point of view, you are more than welcome to go ahead and do it. How do you do that? Visit our social media at BronxNet TV. Join us next week. We continue to elevate the discussion as well as bring further awareness to the issues across the globe. I'm Daren Jaime saying take care.